Last week, you said something that really struck me. You said, I'm scared to death if he's in charge of the system. It's a pretty strong statement, but I want to ask you kind of what you mean by that. And what do you anticipate or expect? What worries you about what could happen to the system?
Look, I'm deeply concerned by the system. It's why we should not put the country at risk by putting Donald Trump back in charge of our justice system, back in charge of our military. You know, Donald Trump came out of those 34 convictions doing what he always does when he gets in legal trouble, kind of a cut and paste job, if you will. And I remember this well from my time as Attorney General. He complains, he bemoans the fact that he lost, and he makes up excuses and tries to pivot away from personal responsibility. Remember, I was Attorney General in Pennsylvania, where he and his cronies and allies took us to court 43 different times to try and stop certain people from voting and stop the votes from being cast. And by the way, he went 0-43. We went 43-0. We protected the rule of law and the will of the people. And now Donald Trump wants to come back and, as he has said, exact revenge. The idea that he would be put in charge of the justice system and have people surrounding him that were out just trying to get, you know, his perceived enemies should scare all Americans. And it's another example of the kind of chaos that he would inflict on our country if he's given the opportunity to lead this nation again. We have always been a nation that respects the rule of law, respects our institutions. Donald Trump has tried to undermine our faith in one another and our faith in our institutions. We didn't let him get away with it in 2020, and I hope and pray we won't let him get away with it in 2024. And I'll be doing everything in my political power here in Pennsylvania to ensure that he is not successful and our institutions again stand and hold.
Well, let me ask you about something you just alluded to, which is the takeover of the justice system. Because I think sometimes when people hear that, they think maybe it's a reshuffling of the government. What does it actually mean? And in the last block, I talked about Russ Vought. He's this influential figure, apparently, in Trump's world. He's former budget chief, could end up being his chief of staff. Who knows if Trump is reelected? I mean, this is a man who has openly said he does not believe the Department of Justice is an independent agency. And I just want to ask you, what is the danger of that? Because I think sometimes it feels like just bureaucracy in Washington, but it's much more than that.
No, it's a lot more than bureaucracy, though it's dangerous if he controls the bureaucracy as well. But just think about the Justice Department. He would have the power to criminally prosecute people who didn't do anything wrong but are just his enemies, go after companies that he disagreed with the products that they're selling or the manner in which they're conducting themselves, to use the Justice Department to strip away people's liberties and rights and freedoms and undermine the Constitution, ignore the courts, and essentially just, you know, have his way with the good people of this nation. What should scare the hell out of everybody is that, remember in 2016, after Donald Trump won and when he took office in 2017, he and most people around him didn't know what the hell they were doing. And there were also still a few people around him that provided some guardrails for his chaotic conduct. Now those people who might provide those guardrails, they're gone. And a lot of the dangerous people around him know how the bureaucracy works, knows how the justice system works, knows how the military works. And if he is given the opportunity to lead this nation again with those people around him who want to do real danger, who want to take away your fundamental freedoms, that should scare the hell out of everybody. And that's not the kind of chaos we want in this country.
It's such an important point. It's the people who know how to manipulate it. It's also the plans that are being written, that a lot of them are even online. In keeping kind of with our legal discussion here, I want to ask you about the Supreme Court. I mean, at the top of the hour, we talked about the Supreme Court and specifically Justice Samuel Alito and this audio where, among many things, he agreed there should be a fight to return our country to a place of godliness. I mean, this comes on the heels of reporting about a flag outside of his house that's been a symbol associated with January 6th, obviously serious ethical scandals around Justice Thomas, an impending ruling on presidential immunity, lots of things. It feels a bit to me like there's a credibility crisis for the Supreme Court. And I just want to ask you, I mean, what's the solution here?
Yeah. Well, Jen, remember, this is the court that Donald Trump packed in order to take away a woman's right to choose, in order to make my daughter and other women out there have fewer rights today than they were born with. So this is purposeful on Donald Trump's part to pack the court with these people that want to restrict our freedom, people who have their own agendas. And Justice Alito, Samuel Alito, is showing his agenda by the way he flies his flags and apparently the way he runs his mouth as well. What the American people need to do is take that into consideration when they go vote this November. You really want to give Donald Trump the ability to appoint more Samuel Alitos to the court, more Clarence Thomases to the court? You really want to give him the ability to put more people on the court who are going to take away our fundamental freedoms? Remember, Justice Thomas wrote in that opinion that abortion is really just the beginning. The very fundamental reasoning or foundational reasoning they used to overturn Roe could be applied in other ways, could be used to restrict your ability to marry who you love, to undermine your ability to be able to go out and take the medications that you and your doctor want you to take. I really fear that this was just the beginning. And if Donald Trump is given the ability to lead this nation again, to put more of those kind of justices on the court, it will not only set us back for 4 years, it'll set us back for 40 years. Listen, the stakes are so high in this election. And while Donald Trump and Joe Biden's names are on the ballot, and this is a binary choice, and don't let anybody tell you there's other people on the ballot, a bunch of randos on the ballot who have no chance of winning. This is a binary choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But in many ways, it's not about those two. It's about the kind of country we want for ourselves, whether we value freedom, whether we care about our institutions, whether we believe that we have to move forward to brighter days, or whether we're going to go back to a very dark time. This election is a referendum and a reflection on all of us. And we have a responsibility to turn out and to get others to turn out who are going to stand up against the kind of extremism that we've seen on the Supreme Court and in the White House with Donald Trump, and instead stand up for freedom, stand up for our fundamental values as Americans, and continue to move our country forward.
Before I let you go, I just have to ask you about Pennsylvania, because in addition to a legal expert, you're a governor and you know the politics of your state extremely well. So we've seen it hasn't been that long since these convictions. We've seen a little bit of impact in the polls. There's a lot of things that are going to be on the ballot and on voters' minds. But as you're talking to voters and knowing your state as you do you think Trump's convictions is going to be an issue that's going to influence people who may be undecided, on the fence, haven't quite come to Joe Biden at this point in your state?
Look, I don't know how the conviction will ultimately play out. I know that the good people of Pennsylvania, they care a lot, whether you're in rural communities, urban communities, suburban communities, about, 4 basic things. They want good schools for their kids. They want safe communities. They want economic opportunities. And they want their freedoms to be protected. And you know what? I think they want to be led by someone who is honest and decent, someone who's actually on their side, like Joe Biden. And all they hear from Donald Trump is a whole bunch of whining about this country. And I think Donald Trump's got to quit whining, got to quit trying to divide us. I mean, consider this, Jen. We're producing more energy than ever before in this nation. We have the strongest economy in the world, and we are beating China for the first time in decades. More people went to work this morning in America than at any other time in our nation's history. So I got a message to Donald Trump and all his negativity and his whining. Stop shit-talking America. This is the greatest country on earth, and it's time that we all start acting like it. The good people of Pennsylvania understand that this is a great country, understand that we got a whole lot going for us. And now it's time for us to continue this path of progress that Joe Biden has laid out and not go back to a negative time, not listen to the whining of the former president, and instead focus on a positive future for all of us.